My dear brothers and sisters in the Lord, I am happy to be presiding at this Eucharistic celebration on this occasion of the Feast of the Presentation of the Lord, which is also the World Day for consecrated men and women, in the company of the consecrated men and women who are working with us in the Diocese of Caloocan as our religious partners, our partners in mission. Today's feast day is better known to many Catholics as the fourth mystery of the Rosary, the Presentation of the Lord. The Mass offered on this day is also traditionally called the Candle Mass. In Spanish, they refer to it as Candelaria, with a lighted candle as symbolism for the Messiah, who is being presented and proclaimed by Simeon in our Gospel today as light to the Gentiles. We hear about Joseph and Mary bringing the baby Jesus to Jerusalem, to the temple, and making an offering as prescribed by the law of Moses. You know, this is a Jewish practice that goes back to the story of the last plague that finally led to the liberation of the Israelite people from slavery in Egypt. That 10th plague was about the passage of an angel of death that claimed the lives of the firstborn animals and human beings. It was supposedly what pressured the Egyptians to finally set the Hebrew slaves free. And you read about it in Exodus chapter 13. To save their own firstborn children from being killed by the passing of the angel of death, the Israelite people were supposedly instructed by Moses to sacrifice an animal that would substitute for their firstborn a year-old lamb. Of course, later they would tolerate a pair of turtle doves or 2 young pigeons for the poor who could not afford a lamb. And it is interesting that the family of Jesus was among those poor people. They were also told to sprinkle the blood of the lamb on the doorposts of their houses, so that on seeing the blood of the lamb, the angel of death would pass over, meaning would skip their homes. And so they called that feast the Passover, because on that day the angel of death passed over their homes and spared the lives of their firstborn children. This is where the idea of redemption originally comes from. How the lives of the firstborn children of the Hebrew slaves were saved through the suffering and death of a sacrificial animal. The idea is called substitute suffering, or redemptive suffering. It is what eventually inspired the prophet Isaiah to write his most important oracle in chapter 53. That oracle about a righteous, about an innocent servant who brings about redemption through his own suffering and death. It was also this oracle, by the way, that helped the early Christians make sense of the undeserved suffering and death of Jesus on the cross as a ransom, as a sacrificial offering for the salvation of sinners, which is what we call redemption. In his story of the presentation of the child Jesus, St. Luke introduces 2 elderly people, Simeon and Anna, Both speak prophetically about the mission of this child, how this child's own life will be presented as a sacrificial offering for the redemption not just of Israel, but of all humankind, and how this child's destiny will make his own mother suffer. The Prophecy of Simeon has become known by its Latin title, Nunc Dimittis, because he says, now you may dismiss, Nunc Dimittis, now you may dismiss your servant, meaning now you may let your servant go or die in peace, because you have allowed me to see with my own eyes what I have been waiting for, a light to reveal you to the nations and the glory of your people, Israel. You know, St. Luke is borrowing these words from two other oracles in the book of the prophet Isaiah, chapters 42 and 49, which are two other servant songs. They are about the redeeming mission of the suffering servant, and both are speaking about the servant's mission to serve as a light to the nations, through which God's grace of salvation would now reach not just Israel, but the ends of the earth, because God intends His salvation for the whole world, for all humankind. And that should explain to you why the lighted candle has become our symbol for the presentation. In the midst of so much evil in this world, very often we are tempted to give in to despair. Our faith teaches us to stubbornly hold on to the light of God's love, of God's mercy and forgiveness, especially when we are so disheartened by all the toxicity of anger, hatred, and resentment. And you all know the modern social media are overflowing with toxicity, anger, hatred, and resentment. Some governments even succeed in taking over on the basis of resentment. Well, we ritualize this through the gesture of candle lighting at baptism, the hope that we're holding on to. At baptism, the priest lights a candle from the Paschal candle, which symbolizes Jesus Christ, and gives it to the parents and the godparents of those who are being baptized. And the priest says, receive the light of Christ. And then he gives the instruction. He says, this light is being entrusted to you to be kept burning brightly. To be kept burning brightly. And this child of yours has been enlightened by Christ. He or she is to walk always as a child of the light. And so the candle's light is supposed to be a symbol of new life, the life that has been given by Christ, the light of the world, a light that should never be extinguished, a light that should never be hidden under a bushel basket, but rather made to shine out in order to drive away the darkness in this world. But the original idea of the redeeming death of the sacrificial lamb is not lost on the symbolic lighted candle that burns in order to give light. In short, anyone who becomes part of the Redeemer's mission of giving light must be ready to endure burning. Must be ready to endure burning. Burning down to the last drop. I'd like to end this reflection by taking the opportunity to thank all my partners in mission in the Diocese of Caloocan. Among our religious men and women are consecrated men and women. Most of them I have sent to the peripheries, to the margins of society in Caloocan. It was with a lot of help from these, our partners in mission, that we have succeeded in putting up mission stations and mission centers so that even the poorest of the poor in the slums of Caloocan, Malabon, and Nabotas would truly feel the presence of the church in their midst. Dear brothers and sisters, from the bottom of my heart, I'd like to tell you how deeply indebted I feel because of your partnership with us in the mission of the Diocese of Caloocan. Let us please give them a big round of applause.